Good evening. This is Kiana, and tonight we are going to be tying film in with some everyday realities such as racism and prejudice. So, before we get into that, please don't forget to subscribe to this channel, like and share this video. You can also follow me on Facebook. I have a brand new Facebook profile that I just created, I think, like a month ago, and it is screaming for followers. So don't forget to subscribe and follow my Facebook page. You can find that link to my Facebook in the bio of my YouTube channel. You can also see what I'm posting on X at Kiana underscore Canada, Kiana underscore Canada. So let's get into it. Tonight, we are going to be talking about the film. Actually, there is a scene in the film, Scary Movie, and I think it's part three. And Scary Movie is actually, I think, a comedic horror that is a parody of the film Scream. And so the scene that comes to mind that is, I think, timely for what seems to be happening today is, especially with what I see many Black Americans going through, is the scene with Brenda in the cinema. And this is what I call the Brenda effect. And I'm going to go into why I call it the Brenda effect. But before I do, I want to kind of, lay out, get some context of this scene. So Brenda is in the movie theater and she is talking quite boisterous in the theater. And she, not only is she doing that, but she is giving up some um known unknowns in the film that I think people already know but are waiting, for that to reveal itself, or it's not supposed to be revealed, or people don't they know but they don't want to know, but she actually reveals information uh, about this movie. And to the audience's credit, she is being loud in the theater. She's recording in the theater. But what we have come to understand about this particular scene in Scary Movie is that it is often tropes about Black Americans and their experiences. So the first trope that we see in this scene is that Black Americans are always loud. Black Americans can't be quiet, right? So that's a trope that is often in a lot of comedy films. Another trope that is, I think, that many people will find funny is that the trope that Black Americans bring recording devices into movie theaters so that they can actually have their own personal copy at home. But I think that we understand that Black Americans are really not the only one in the world, probably not the only ones in the world that does that. I'm pretty sure, I've seen other nationalities and ethnicities recording in the theater. But of course, when I was younger, I seen this happening. So, of course, this is a trope that is often attributed to Black Americans. So it's a stereotype that when Black Americans go into the theater, one thing that they're going to do is pull out a camcorder and start recording the film. And then there is the notion that Black Americans are constantly or persistently talking during the film. So, not giving space for peace and quiet, which is quite interesting. Um, but what I find more interesting and compelling about this specific scene is where we have the villain, I believe his name is Ghostface, who sits right next to Brenda. And so, of course, before Ghostface sits next to Brenda, you have a lot of people in the moviegoers chastising Brenda, uh, giving her a grimace, giving her directives, instructions, uh, talking to her rudely because she is one, either on the phone, two, she is speaking during the film, or three, she is recording the film when I guess you're not supposed to be doing that. And so when Ghostface sits next to Brenda, what we see is that this is imprimatur for everyone in the scene who has a grievance against this loud black woman to take their anger out on her. So, what we see in this film is that numerous people are coming up and, of course, attacking Brenda and attacking her from different angles. And it's different nationalities all coming together in a united front to attack a black woman who wasn't being aggressive, wasn't being physical, just was just loud in a theater and I think quite disruptive, perhaps, and recording in a theater. Now, we could go through a number of options and say, you know what, well, one thing that they could have done is they could have got security, and security could have come and escorted her out of the theater. And of course, that wouldn't be a scary movie. It wouldn't be a funny scene, right? But in real life, that is something that could have happened, right? But we often understand that sometimes that is really not an option that people deliberate on or an option that people consider. They often consider the options that we see take place in the scene, and that is through violence, unfortunately. And so, why I call this the Brenda effect is because this is quite timely for what is happening to Black women, and not only Black women, but Black people, Black Americans today. So, one, when Black Americans are being themselves or exposing an unknown known, so a known unknown. So, like in the movie, of course, or excuse me, yeah, in the film Scary Movie, Brenda's in a theater and she's like, she exposes something about the woman in the film. And so everybody is angry with her for that revelation, although everybody knows that, uh, I guess they are angry that it was her that blurted it out, or maybe they felt that it didn't need to be said. So that's one, two, it was her, it didn't need to be said. And three, maybe they just didn't want to know, right? Although they knew, but they just didn't want to acknowledge it. And so the third is that under this effect, what often happens is that Black Americans are often attacked for standing up for themselves. And that happens pretty frequently because, as we see in this film, from all angles, Brenda is being attacked by different people. And yet she attempts to stand up for herself. And of course, I think if we analyze this scene very deeply, we understand that sometimes this is really about cultural differences and ethnic differences that are just not merging together, not coming together in sync. And so, with this specific scene, what we understand is that maybe for Brenda, she doesn't understand that she is speaking too loudly, right? And although they are actually giving her instructions and directives to tell her to be quiet, it's coming off as quite passive aggressive and with an air of authority. So actually, like treating her as if she's a child and not an equal. And so this often happens in intimate spaces and often social and public spaces that Black Americans and Black people find themselves in, is that when they are either being themselves or just exposing a known unknown that really is not harmful, but so in of course in the film we can see that that's really not harmful because she was watching a film and everybody was watching a film. So the fact that she blurted that out was, I guess, it can be disappointing, but it wasn't an attack on anyone in the theater. And then, and we can see that happen in real life. Sometimes Black Americans are speaking about known unknowns, things that are reflective of perhaps a human rights violation or things that are happening in the world today. And because it is a Black person that is speaking about it, everyone will often get upset about that and go on the offensive and attack the Black American. And so sometimes it's an offensive and defensive. But third, when Black Americans are standing up for themselves, Black women, as we see with Brenda, this is often what we come to see is that this is an opportunity often for people who have harbored grievances against Black women or Black people in general to come together in a united front to attack that Black person. A prime example is what is happening to Brianna Joy Gray right now. So, right now, Brianna Joy Gray, she uploaded a message to Twitter about her something that Mehdi Hassan said, and this has to do with the election. So they are in disagreement about whether people should be voting for the Democratic Party and whether they should be voting for the Green Party. So Mehdi Hassan believes that people should be voting for the Democratic Party and not the Republican Party or not the Green Party because, in his view, that any votes for the Green Party is actually a vote for the Republican Party. And so Brianna Joy Gray, she takes umbrage with that. She feels that no, that's really not the case. If we're ever going to get out of the duopoly, this two-party system, then we have to venture off and vote for excuse me, third party candidates. And so they had a back and forth on Twitter X, and Mehdi delivered some harsh words towards Brianna Joy Gray. And this was a green light for other groups of people on the left to come in and attack Brianna. So now we have groups of men obviously coming together in unison and going against Brianna. And again, we often see this happening. And before I go any further, I want to let you know that I am not a Trump supporter. I would never, ever vote for Trump. My the issues that I advocate for, the people that I care about, would never ever allow me to cast a ballot or even speak, in support of a Trump presidency. But that doesn't mean that we have to close our ears to all the conversations that is happening around us. And I think what's really unfortunate now is that the Democratic Party, or those that are attached to the Democratic Party, are so used to seeing things in this very worm's eye view, this tunnel vision, that if you say that you just want to vote outside of the Democratic Party, or this two party system, there's just no way that they can fathom that. They can't understand it. And so that's what I'm seeing right now. I think the same thing is happening with Candace Owens. Again, I will reiterate, I think about 95% of the things that Candace Owens talks about, I disagree with. But that doesn't mean that she is wrong all the time. And just because we don't like a person's politics, that doesn't mean that that person is going to be wrong 100% of the time. And I think that this is this is kind of what is going on today, is that what we have is groups of people coming together to say that specific individuals are wrong 100% of the time, even when they might be right. And that could be their belief that that person is wrong is either tied to their identity, tied to that person's identity, tied to that person's political ideology, tied to that person's cultural beliefs, tied to that person's upbringing. And so if we're going to move, let's go back to the Brenda effect. So when we see Brenda recording in the theater, what I take that at, just outside of the context of the film, right, is really just keeping a record of the violence that's happening. Because remember, Brenda turned to the person that was yelling at her and screaming at her and said, "I got you on candy camera. I got you on candy camera now." She said that. And so oftentimes this is reflective, honestly, of the Black American experience. Sometimes we often have to pull out our cameras and record because there is this consistency and this um, so yeah, of course, it's consistent, it's prevalent, and it is a common practice for non-Black Americans to launch some of the most egregious claims against Black Americans, to discredit them, to undermine their testimony, and to shine them in a negative light without any factual evidence. And we understand that in some jurisdictions that the testimony of non-Black Americans often holds a lot of weight than the testimony of Black Americans. So Black Americans, we have to be very careful in our social, political, and social political interactions with people, because those interactions could be taken out of context. And so another important aspect of the Brenda effect is that non-Black Americans are given permission to chastise, intimidate, and harm a Black person. Of course, like I said, they're given imprimatur by this figures such as Ghostface, which is a person that we don't see, right? We don't see who is really in this costume. We don't really see who's giving these orders. We don't see who's doing this harm, but we know that this person has some power and some authority over the interactions and the themes of the films that we see. And when we actually translate this into real life, we can see how toxic authority figures often conceal themselves behind the curtains and actually use colluders and people that want to, or in essence, they're colluders. So they're colluders who are, um, following the orders of a toxic authority figure. To do what? Again, to chastise, to intimidate, or to harm a Black person, and to do so with impunity. With impunity, they have an exemption from punishment, no consequences whatsoever. And so today I posted something on my Facebook page, which I think ties into this quite, or neatly, is that sometimes as a Black American, you only have one chance to get it wrong. And what do I mean by that? So in every interaction, if you make a mistake, then you don't have any other chances. So whereas your counterpart or your peers or your associates or your acquaintances, where they have the opportunity to get it wrong 1,000 times, you only have one chance to get it wrong. So, let's say, for example, you're in a situation where you're trying to apply for a job and your resume or your CV is impeccable. You have you're dressed nice, you're educated, and but something that you say in the interview, perhaps maybe you didn't. Well, let's say you don't even say anything. Maybe maybe you didn't smile, or maybe the interviewer didn't think that you smiled, but you were smiling. Well, they wouldn't hire you because of that reason. Howsoever, you could have your peer or your, this person that you're competing with for this job, this candidate who is not smiling, who didn't come to the interview really fresh and uh, neat and clean, tailored suit, etc. Their resume, they don't have the level of education that you have, and probably not the experience that you have, but they're given all these chances to get it right. And so they are often hired before you are. Now, this is not in every instance, this was just an example, but you can kind of see how this ties in together and why this is quite ominous. And so I was just watching some clips from Scary Movie because Brenda was my favorite character in that movie. And then I watched that scene and I was like, this looks like what I'm seeing that's happening today, right? That's happening to Black women today. And so I haven't done a lot of research on the Brenda effect, but I think that what I'm going to be doing is building on it and maybe tying it into a broader piece that I may be doing um, that has to do with human rights. So I'm Kiana. Thank you for listening. And there's so much more that we can talk about. I probably will record some more later this week. But again, don't forget to subscribe to this channel. Uh, every subscriber counts and is important. Don't forget to comment. You can also follow me again on Twitter at Kiana_Canada. I have a Facebook, which is actually linked into my YouTube profile, so you can actually view what I post there. And I look forward to talking to you next time. Bye bye.